Yakima Valley. It's hour number 3 of the Mike Bastinelli Show on this Monday, the 21st day of April. Thank you so much for tuning in to AM 1280 and FM 99.3. News Talk KIT and newstalkkit.com. Don't forget to check out our website, newstalkkit.com, and find out how you could possibly win a trip to, how about Las Vegas or Southern California Disneyland or Pebble Beach or the Indy 500. All you have to do is go to our website, newstalkkit.com. Near the top of the screen, click on Getaway with Ray's Market Fresh IGA, and you could find out how you can register. You have until Thursday to do so. Thursday at 6 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, actually, is when the registration ends. So go to our website, newstalkkit.com, and see how you can sign up to participate. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at newstalkkit. Well, we'd like to welcome to the program Gavin Seim, who is a candidate for Congress, and according to Harry Reid, a domestic terrorist. So it's the first time that I've ever had someone that could potentially be a domestic terrorist on the program. Gavin, how are you?
Hey, good to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Of course, the last time we had Gavin on the program, he had announced that he's running for Congress, and that is, I think, before Doc announced that he's not running.
In January, I think.
And then after Doc announced that he's not running, a whole bunch of other people have now entered.
It's gotten interesting since.
So how has it changed, Gavin, since Doc announced he's not running?
You know, it's different because on the one hand, when I was this young man taking on Doc, there was kind of this attitude of, oh, you can't take on the entrenched Republican. And I said, well, you know what? We need to focus on the Constitution, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to take it on. And now that it's an open field, I mean, between Democrats and Republicans, I think there's 14, 15 candidates, something like that. So on the one hand, it's an open field, and it's not looked at anymore like, oh, you can't take it. On the other hand, you're not quite as unique anymore. Whereas before it's like, hey, this guy's running for Congress against a sitting Republican as a constitutional Republican. And now it's like, this is another guy that's running for Congress.
So how has it changed your campaign, or is it
our message has pretty much stayed the same? I mean, we've had to reorganize a little bit, change things around a little, but we're a very grassroots campaign, and my message has always been the Constitution, the fundamentals of America, and we need fighters in D.C. who will take a stand and start limiting government and start those conversations.
Now, you went down to Nevada to see firsthand what was going on. Why did you go down there?
I was watching this story, and this was the Tuesday before all this went down, I think Monday, Tuesday, and I actually called and spoke with Cliven Bundy on that Tuesday, and that's usually how I do things, because in my campaign, in my personal life, I'm a very conversational. I like to talk about things, and in the position I'm running for, I always try to make sure that I get my facts straight. So I called directly and actually got a hold of him. This was before it blew up quite so huge to where nobody could get a hold of him, and I talked with him on the phone for about 15 minutes, and what I realized in talking to Cliven Bundy is that this is not an anarchist who doesn't want to pay his bills kind of person. I mean, he was talking to me about the enumerated powers and about the Constitution, and I realized that this wasn't about cows, this was about liberty. And that's kind of what I was thinking from what I saw, but when I talked to this man, I'm like, okay, he's serious about this. And then I sat down and I was with my brother Nathan, and basically we talked about it, and what it came down to was, for me, I'm always talking about us standing up and standing with our neighbors and taking a stand for the Constitution. And as an American, and also as a candidate who's always saying that, I have to put my money where my mouth is.
Now, many people are saying, well, he's not paying grazing fees. He's not paying what other cattle ranchers are paying. I mean, that's what Harry Reid said, and as we're talking about it, he's on the screen now on the television.
Right.
And I've even heard people like Judge Andrew Napolitano on Fox, which is more of a libertarian, and he prides himself in being a constitutionalist. He even says that the law might not be on Mr. Bundy's side. So help us understand what.
I think there's multiple facets. I want to first preface that there's people on the legal side and the land rights side that are more experienced than I am. When I first went down there, we sat down and I said, I don't know for sure where the law falls on the fact that of the grazing rights and all that. What I do know is we have the BLM down there pointing guns at people, making First Amendment zones. So initially, when I first started loading up and went to head down there, it was, we have a lawless federal government down here, regardless of where all the
it's
other
how they
things
reacted to this issue that really upsets you.
That was the start of it. And then going forward, as we went down there, and this wasn't the initial plan, but we ended up coordinating with other people from Washington, Scott here out of Yakima, Anthony Bosworth, who I believe is actually running for sheriff down here in Yakima County, and
Representative Dave Taylor.
Yeah, Dave Taylor and Matt Shea ended up coming down there, and we were actually coordinating. Once we got on the ground and kind of all connected and realized we were all going the same way, we were communicating with them from the ground, and they were getting us information, and so there got to be a lot of coordination from our team, and we can come to that in a minute, but there is some interesting things that came to light.
What were these First Amendment zones? I mean, did they actually move people like 3 miles away?
They were trying to, but by the time I got there, people were ignoring that. So,
but just the fact that they were,
just the very idea of it is such tyranny.
They could get away
Absolutely.
with it.
It's utterly, it's astounding. It really is.
So that tells me they've probably done that before.
Yeah, and we're seeing these kind of things more and more, and it's our duty as Americans to stand up to that. That's not law, that's lawlessness.
We're talking to Gavin Seim, who is a Republican candidate for Congress and recently returned from Nevada, where he saw firsthand the battle between the feds and a cattle rancher. We'll talk more to Gavin after the break as we continue hour number 3 of the Mike Bastinelli Show on News Talk KIT. The historic Larson Building in downtown Yakima will be out there on Friday. The plan is to be out there for the entire show from 3 to 6 as we kick off spring barrel tasting weekend in the Yakima Valley. Check out Kano Winery, their beautiful, expanded and remodeled tasting room in the ground floor of the historic Larson Building in downtown Yakima. We're talking to Gavin Seim, who is running for Congress. He recently went to Nevada to see firsthand the standoff between the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, and Cliven Bundy, a cattle rancher. And during the break, Gavin, tell our listeners what you told me. I mean, I've seen the video of a real tense situation that almost got out of hand. You were there firsthand. What did you see? What did you feel when that was all going down, where the armed BLM agents confronted a lot of local citizens? Yeah,
we were there on the ground on Saturday, and I didn't get to be right at the front when they went out there and challenged. We were kind of back coordinating and communicating with some of the representatives from back home and trying to keep the information flowing. But what we saw here was, first and foremost, a lawless act of government. We saw bureaucratic terrorism from the federal government. And I mean this quite literally. I mean, if you think about terrorism, because they're calling us names. Harry Reid likes to put these labels on people like me and the other patriots that were there. But what we saw down there, and a lot of you have seen these videos, is we saw, women and brothers and sisters standing up to these people. We saw people getting pushed around and tased. We saw federal government who, first of all, didn't have authority there in the first place. If something needed to go down there, if there was an issue that needed to be dealt with, from a legal perspective, it's the sheriff's responsibility to deal with that. The county sheriff is the one who's supposed to address that. We're not supposed to have federal agents coming in and posing as police officers and forcing people to do these kind of things and taking actions like they were doing there. But next of all, we have essentially the federal government trying to force a situation where they could fire on American citizens. I mean, they had sniper rifles aimed at women and children. And the level of how far we've come from these basic principles that the framers set up for us in the Constitution, it really is shocking, but at the same time, it's really amazing, because despite what some of the news media likes to spin, we didn't see down there from the Patriots a bunch of hotheads who were looking to start a fight. By and large, the Patriots were down there as peacekeepers. We were willing to stand and defend our neighbors if need be, but they were actually very well self-controlled, and people were standing together in liberty and in prayer and looking at the foundations of America and looking to God.
Is it your belief that if you weren't there along with other folks from around the country, that the feds would have gone in and taken the whatever they wanted to take by force.
Right. Obviously, I'm not going to attribute it to me. I mean, it was the whole unit.
That's
but absolutely. Correct.
The people that came from all over the country,
absolutely.
mainly from the western states, that basically acted as a buffer between the feds and the Bundys.
The people stood up, and that's what the people are supposed to do. That's our job. You know, if we stand up now, we don't have to fight to take back our liberty later. So it was actually people doing their duty and people going down there and standing up. And of course, I'm going to give credit to the people back at home that were praying and that were supporting and all that kind of stuff as well. But what we saw here was America standing up to tyranny.
So you don't. Well, comment on Harry Reid's comments. I mean, he basically said that we live in a nation of laws, that there's a rule of law, and that this guy was not following the law, and that there were multiple court orders ordering him to stop grazing his cattle or pay the grazing fees. So in his mind, in the mind of many people, it's clear cut. He broke the law, and the feds were just trying to enforce the law.
I would say to Harry Reid, Harry, we do live in a nation of laws, and it's about time that you started following the law, and it's about time that we started holding you accountable. Now, we can have conversations about how we handle the grazing rights and things like that, but let's get beyond that, and people can look into that, but let's think about this. Do you want the government coming and pointing guns at your neighbors and your wives and your children because you didn't pay a bill that they say is due? Is that the America we want to live in?
That's really what it boils down to, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Got to take a break. We're going to continue talking to Gavin Seim. I saw that video of the documentary filmmaker that was in a gully, and he was holding up his camera, and they had rifles pointed at him. That was scary. We'll talk about that and much more. Back in a moment. Continue hour number 3 of the Mike Bastinelli Show on News Talk KIT.
Informed, entertained, and challenged.
It's the Mike Bastinelli Show. AM 1280, FM 99.3, News Talk KIT.
It is a 5:36. This segment of the Mike Bastinelli Show is brought to you by the Buyer's Agent. Hey, if you are serious about buying a home, the Buyer's Agent is serious about saving you money. Check out HappyHomebuyer.com or call 575-1212. Well, more bad news for the Mariners. They announced today that rookie sensation James Paxton, who appeared to be off to a great start, has been placed on a 6 to 8 week rehab program. Man alive. It's just, I wonder if Robinson Cano is thinking, gee, can I change my mind? And go back to New York. Of course, he's making $24 million a year, so I don't know if he's worried too much. But yeah, the Mariners, in the midst of a 6-game losing streak, found out today that they won't get Paxton back for at least 2 months, if that's even possible to get him back. We're talking to Gavin Seim, who is a Republican candidate for Congress, recently returned from Nevada. Where he saw firsthand the battle between Cliven Bundy and the Nevada rancher and the federal government. Gavin, as I look at this, and I'm like you, I'm not an expert on the legal maneuvering and whether he owed grazing fees or not. It appears that he did. But what's troubling to me is that 80% of Nevada or something like that is federal lands.
Right.
And, these are supposed to be public lands.
Well, not only
that should be public lands, not
right.
federal government land. Yeah,
and not only are they supposed to be public lands, they're really not supposed to be federal government public lands. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, we the people told the government what they can do, and in the rest of the Constitution, we granted them their authority. So it was the law that we placed on government. That was the Constitution. And for the federal government to, first of all, have all these lands, and even in Washington State, I think it's like 40%. I mean, these massive areas of land that should be really administered by the state, not the federal government. So that was, I think, the first mistake, is we let the federal government step over the boundaries of the Constitution, and government's natural state is to grow into tyranny. So, hey, if we let them cross that line, they just keep crossing more and more lines, and now in the name of protecting a tortoise who is not having a problem down there, because it's not really about protecting a tortoise. It's about them controlling land. It's about them waging war on rural America.
Well, like protecting the so-called protecting the spotted owl in the 80s.
It's
same thing.
It's a federal government overreach of using this environmental radicalism and shoving it down people's throats in the name of protecting animals or lands or this or that, to take away our liberty.
Yeah, it's really discouraging, because I've heard, well, most people on the left side with the government on this one, and a lot of people on the right.
What we're seeing
are even saying, well, he went too far. And I mean, what was your read? I know you didn't get a chance to talk to him too much, but are the Bundys good people, or?
Yeah, my read was this was a family really standing up courageously. And you think about what they did here, the amount of courage these people had. If people hadn't come to support them, we very likely might have seen another Waco or something like that. And so, number one, I want to give credit to God for keeping this from turning bloody, but I want to give credit also to all these people that were supporting this and standing on this. We had people from Yakima, we had people from Moses Lake, people from Washington, and all over the country. There was people coming from thousands of miles away to take this stand and say, we're not just going to stand by. And this again, it's so far beyond land rights. I mean, you can look into the legal side, and the Bundys had first in time, first in right. I mean, they were there long before the BLM. So in a legal sense, I think if we wanted to pin down to it, we could make it pretty clear that they own these grazing rights. So even in that sense, but let's just step away from that for a minute. Let's say even that we disagree on that side of it. We don't want the federal government to be terrorizing American citizens. And as Thomas Jefferson said, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And this Constitution right here, that's the law. And there's one thing that's not open for debate here for anybody who's using reason and facts. The federal government crossed the line of the constitutional law. And I think they lost the battle of justice the moment they were pointing sniper rifles at women and children.
Yeah, as we were saying during the break, I firmly believe that if the folks supporting the Bundys, if someone would have fired a shot, that this could have really turned into another, potentially Waco or Ruby Ridge. It's a good thing that no one.
Right. And there was
fired a shot because the feds were ready to respond.
And it's hard. It's really hard to convey the camaraderie that was down there. It doesn't mean we were all on the same page. It's really hard to convey. And this is something I think people really need to take away from this. They need to take away that we need to limit the federal government within the law that we placed upon them, because that is the law, not whatever Harry Reid or anybody else makes up over here on this day. The law is our Constitution. It's the limitations that we placed on government, and it's we the people. But I want people to really understand, hundreds of people were willing to die for your liberty last Saturday. And people continually are standing up for this. And just stop and let that sink in. You had uncles and aunts and cousins and brothers and sisters, just ordinary, everyday people.
There was that level of commitment.
There was that level of commitment. And people were absolutely ready to, and even almost, I think we were expecting people to die, because the government was escalating. If you were down there on the ground, they were actually escalating the situation. And I think they were hoping that we would lose our heads and fire the first shot.
Why do you think they backed off?
Honestly, personally, I think God intervened. I mean, I think that, and if you were on the ground, you would relate to this more. I think a lot of people there would agree with that. And this is on my personal level. There was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of solidarity, and people saying, we're going to stand together, and we're going to trust in God, and we're going to stick to those foundations of America. On a practical level, maybe they didn't want it to go that far today, because it would have been a PR nightmare, but it looked like that's where they were taking this. And basically, it seemed like what happened is they went up there, and at the last minute, the cowardly sheriff who didn't do his job kind of rushed in and said, "Okay, we're not going to have a gunfight here today." And he doesn't get the credit for the stand because he never should have let that happen. And this comes back to us understanding who we're putting in office for sheriff in our counties, because that has an incredible amount of authority. The sheriff's the one who should have been addressing this issue from the very beginning.
Well, like I said, it's a good thing that that one hothead didn't pull the trigger
right
on the side of the people standing up to the government, because it could have really gotten ugly.
It could have.
But I got to believe that a lot of those men and women working for the BLM, I got to believe they don't want to fire a shot either.
You would think so, but there is strong evidence that this was not just your average BLM agent, that they actually had contractors down there that were hired.
Really?
And you can look this up. I mean, this isn't like an out there rumor. The people who have military experience and combat experience, they could kind of tell the difference between the different groups of your average BLM guy and the way that these guys carry themselves that had experience like from Iraq and that were contractors. So I don't want to be too specific, but that's something to look into, because there is strong evidence that suggests that is true, which suggests that they were really gearing up for something bad.
I want to talk about what this Western States Coalition is all about. We had Representative Dave Taylor on last week, and he touched on it. But I want to talk about the broader sense, what potentially could come of it. Got to take a break. We're talking to congressional candidate Gavin Seim, who was down in Nevada seeing firsthand the standoff between the Bundys and the federal government. We'll talk more about that. If you've got a question for Gavin, feel free to give us a call after the break. 972-5481 is the number to call. It's the Mike Bastinelli Show. One more segment straight ahead on News Talk KIT.
News Talk KIT.
It is 5:51 as we head down the home stretch. Brian just told me during the break, and I don't quite get this one, but in Pete and John I will trust, the Seahawks apparently traded a 7th-round pick, which doesn't amount to much, for Terrell Pryor, the former Raider quarterback, and maybe the Seahawks are going to change positions. I'm not really sure. He was a guy that was highly touted out of, I think, high school in Pennsylvania, went to Ohio State, really had a less than stellar career, left early, entered the supplemental draft, went to the Raiders, did okay. He wasn't as bad as Jamarcus Russell, but wasn't very good. If you can't win the starting job in L.A. or in Oakland, you're not very good. Anyway, the Seahawks picked him up. We'll see what that's all about. Talking to Gavin Seim, congressional candidate, going after the seat that is currently held by Doc Hastings. Of course, Gavin actually announced that he was running while Doc was still in the race, and then after Doc announced that he's not going to seek re-election, then a whole bunch of other people joined in. But Gavin went down to Nevada and saw firsthand the battle between the Cliven Bundy family, the cattle rancher, and the federal government. We had Dave Taylor on last week, our 15th district representative, and he went down there too, and he talked about how out of this came the formation of the Coalition of Western States. Right. So you were talking about that. What is this? And I know there was a news conference announcing this. What will come out of this?
Essentially, what came out of this, in one sense, is that we have state legislators, national leaders, and people that are standing together. And basically there was a meeting after this of some of the leaders and state legislators and getting together and saying, we need to organize, we need to stand together, and we need to put in place a coalition where when things like this happen, we get together and we take a unified stand against it. And we actually saw this. It's important to note that the only people down there we're not just patriots. I mean, you had state legislators. You now have congressmen coming out and saying that the BLM's actions were lawless in official papers. You know, it's becoming more and more clear that the federal government way overstepped, and you're seeing legislators and people stand up and say we have to do something about this, and that I think is what we're going to see from the coalition of Western states, is a group of people united against tyranny.
So basically a clearinghouse or a place where people can get information on maybe another Clive and Bundy case that comes down the pike. I mean, is that really what we're talking about here?
In part, yes, because you have a lot of people on board, people that have legal experience, people that are legislators, so you have a lot of experience coming together there. And on the one side, one of the things we dealt with on the ground that we were having to address and spend a lot of time when we were there is just getting accurate information out. You know, even being on the ground, I'd be sitting on the ground and we'd get a call saying, hey, we hear something's going down. And we're like, no, we're just actually having hamburgers. You know? And so the accurate information getting out is really important because people need to know what's happening so they can know how to react. But I think it's important to note that the coalition, you know, you have people down there that were actually taking action. You have legislators that were down there this week who were basically standing watch. And one of these was Michele Fiore, an assemblywoman from Nevada, and forgive me if I got that name a little off, but I believe that's correct. And she was standing watch out there, basically saying, "Hey, if you guys want to come back, you're going to have to go through me." And so we have courage from legislators and from leaders, and the coalition is basically, well, I don't want to speak for them because a lot of things we have not worked out yet, but it's basically an organization saying we're going to unite and organize and find ways to start limiting the government, put the federal government back where they belong. We have to stop allowing this illegitimate authority from government.
Do you think that this is a rallying point for people that have been saying for years that the feds have gone too far? Do you think they'll point to this case, that this might be like ground zero of the battle?
This is pivotal. I mean, what we saw here at the Bundy Ranch, or the Battle of Bunkerville, as it's often being called, it's absolutely historic. And so understand, even if we can sit here and maybe we're not all clear on all the land rights and things like that, the basic premise is, do we want the federal government overstepping the boundaries of the Constitution and coming in and beating people up and assaulting them and pointing guns at them without due process of law? And if the answer is no, then absolutely we have to start uniting and standing against that.
Michele Fiore is the name.
Yes.
Fiore was my father's first name. So
nice.
It means flower in Italian, by the way.
Awesome.
That's her name. She's actually born in Brooklyn, New York, but she's a Nevada assemblywoman.
She's a Spitfire. She has a lot of courage, and she's kind of leading the way down there.
Last name like Fiore, she's probably got some Italian in her.
That's right. It's this essential element that liberty is not the fringe, liberty is the foundation. And while we may not all agree on everything, we can say, here's this Constitution, this is what America was founded on. If we don't start taking back our liberty now, our children and grandchildren will have to do it at the price of blood in the future.
Now, you got a meeting or an event coming up this weekend?
Yeah, actually, we're going to do, I'm going to host a little event along with some of us other guys that were down there on the ground at the Bundy Ranch Saturday, this coming Saturday, 3 p.m. at the Howard Johnson here in Yakima. And just kind of a little town hall, pretty much informal. Just come on down and we're going to talk about what happened, take some questions, and just keep it simple. But I want to keep communicating with the district, and there's other people that were there with me, like Anthony Bosworth, who's running for sheriff, and you know, we want to communicate and get these ideas out there and have people understanding what really happened there and why it means so much and why it matters for liberty.
Well, thank God for the pictures. Thank God that the media got on this, and that was probably the way that allowed people to see firsthand, and maybe that's what drew people to Nevada from all over the country.
Yeah, the truth's getting out there.
Yeah. Keep it up.
Thanks for having me.
Good talking to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Mike.
Gavin Seim, your website, people want to know?
CallMeGav.com.
CallMeGav.com. Okay, got it.
You guys
That'll do it for the Mike Bastinelli Show. Fox News next, followed by the Dave Ramsey Show. Don't forget to join Dave and Lance for the morning news tomorrow from 6 until 9. We'll be back here again tomorrow from 3 to 6. One of our guests will be Commissioner Mike Leda. We'll talk about and find out what the county is going to do about pot sales. The Planning Commission has said no to a ban. What will the commissioners do? We'll talk about that and much more tomorrow. News next on News Talk KIT.